The first thing Elias learned about the Galactic Combat Academy was that gravity here was optional. The second was that humiliation wasn't. Again, barked Instructor Vector. The training floor shifted beneath Elias' boots as the arena recalibrated. Magnetic plates hummed. The gravity field adjusted to 1.3 standard. Just enough to make every movement slower. Sloppier. Harder. Across from him stood Coril, a fourth-year cadet with 6 combat commendations already logged in his profile. His species was taller than humans by a full head, built with digitigrade legs and armored shoulder ridges that flexed with every breath. The class circled the arena in a raised ring, watching. Waiting. Elias adjusted the Academy-issued exobrace around his forearms. It wasn't full armor. Just assistive training gear meant to simulate battlefield weight and reaction delay. Front stance, Vector ordered. Coril shifted immediately into textbook Imperial Guard posture, left leg forward, stabilizers flared, weight angled aggressively toward strike range. Elias mirrored him. A second later, he knew he'd already made a mistake. Engage. Coril moved first. Too fast. The alien cadet lunged, pivoting on his rear stabilizer fins, bringing his arm across in a controlled strike meant to test reaction speed. Elias tried to block. He caught the hit, but the impact drove him sideways. His boots skidded across the magnetic floor. Laughter erupted from the ring. Balance, human, someone called out. Maybe gravity's too heavy for Earth bones. Coril pressed forward again, rotating into a follow-up sweep. Elias misjudged the angle and overcorrected. His weight shifted wrong. His left heel lifted just slightly. And that was enough. Coril hooked his leg and sent Elias crashing onto his back. The air blasted from his lungs as the gravity field pulsed heavier for dramatic effect. The class roared. Instructor Vector descended from the observation tier slowly, heavy boots striking the metal floor with deliberate rhythm. He stopped over Elias and looked down at him with narrow, amber eyes. This, Vector announced to the class, is what happens when myth replaces training. More laughter. Elias forced himself to sit up. His cheek burned where Coril's forearm had grazed him. Vector crouched slightly, voice dropping just enough to be intimate, but still loud enough for everyone to hear. Humans have impressive endurance metrics, he said. But combat doctrine is not inherited through bedtime stories. The class chuckled. Elias swallowed. He should have stayed quiet. He knew that. But something about the stance, about Coril's overcommitment on the lunge, itched in his brain. My grandpa said that stance gets you killed, Elias muttered. The laughter stopped. Not because they respected it. Because they wanted to hear more. Vector's head tilted. Repeat that. Elias hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to back down. Instead, he pushed himself to his feet. My grandpa trained the Emperor's Guard, he said, forcing the words out evenly. He said leaning that heavy on your front stabilizers makes you predictable. Silence. Then. The arena exploded with laughter. Even cadets who hadn't reacted earlier doubled over now. Your grandfather trained the Emperor's Guard. Coril mocked, wiping a tear from one eye ridge. That would make him what, 300 cycles old? Vector stood fully now. His expression had gone cold. You insult Imperial history, he said quietly. Elias felt the shift immediately. This wasn't teasing anymore. I didn't mean. The slap came fast. Not a wild strike. Not rage. A controlled disciplinary blow delivered with the precision of someone who'd done it before. Vector's palm cracked across Elias' face. The force spun him halfway around before gravity caught him. Gasps rippled through the ring. Then silence. Imperial Guard doctrine, Vector said evenly, is perfected. It does not require commentary from off-world mechanics or their delusional grandchildren. Elias' ears rang. His cheek throbbed. He stared at the floor. Part of him wanted to say it was a joke. That he'd exaggerated. That his grandfather just fixed engines on guard ships and talked too much after dinner. But he remembered the old man's hands, steady even when they shook. The way he'd corrected Elias' posture with 2 fingers and said, never lean where your enemy expects you to. The hangar floor trembled. At first, Elias thought it was just his pulse in his ears. Then everyone felt it. A low, mechanical groan echoed through the arena. The massive reinforced hangar doors behind the training floor began to move. Slowly. Grinding metal against metal. Every cadet turned. The doors hadn't been scheduled to open during drills. Light spilled in from the maintenance bay beyond, harsh white against the training arena's sterile glow. Dust motes floated in the beam. Through the widening gap, The silhouette of an Imperial warship loomed, scarred hull plating, maintenance scaffolds clinging to its sides. And stepping through the opening. A figure. Not armored. Not tall. Wearing oil-stained coveralls. Wiping grease from his hands with a worn cloth. He walked with an easy, unhurried stride, boots clicking softly against the metal deck. The laughter in the arena died completely. The man stopped just inside the threshold and glanced around the training floor. His eyes settled on Elias. Then on Instructor Vector. Then on Coryl's stance. He tilted his head slightly. "You're leaning too heavy on your front stabilizers," the old human mechanic said calmly. The entire arena froze. Elias felt the air change. Behind him, the hangar doors continued to open. And no one was laughing anymore. The hangar doors finished opening with a final hydraulic sigh. Behind the old man, the Imperial warship loomed in full view. It wasn't one of the sleek parade cruisers shown in recruitment holos. This one was scarred. Hull plating patched in places with mismatched alloys. Weapon ports sealed with maintenance tags. The ship bore the kind of wear that came from surviving things. Real things. The old human mechanic stepped fully onto the training floor. He wasn't tall. Not especially broad. His coveralls were faded and stained with coolant and carbon scoring. A tool case hung from one hand, old-fashioned metal, edges worn smooth from decades of use. He stopped about 10 meters from Instructor Vector. Silence held the arena. Vector straightened, towering over the human by nearly a head and a half. "This is a restricted training session," the instructor said coolly. "Maintenance personnel are not authorized inside the combat ring." The mechanic looked down at the glowing boundary line around the arena floor. Then he stepped over it. Calmly. "I won't take long," he replied. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Coryl shifted uneasily but held his stance, left leg forward, stabilizers slightly flared, weight angled aggressively. The mechanic glanced at him once. Then at Elias. Then back at Vector. "His right," the old man said, nodding faintly toward Elias. "You're overcommitting on the front leg." A ripple of disbelief moved through the cadets. Vector's jaw tightened. "This is Imperial Guard doctrine." The mechanic's eyes flicked toward the warship behind him. Not the original version. A murmur broke out in the ring. Vector's voice sharpened. "You presume to critique Imperial combat standards." The mechanic shrugged slightly. "I'm not critiquing," he said. "I'm correcting." That did it. "Very well," Vector said, stepping forward. "Demonstrate." The cadets leaned in. The mechanic set his tool case gently on the floor just outside the ring's center. It made a soft metallic click. No armor. No assistive exobrace. No visible augmentations. Just an old man in work clothes standing under 1.3 gravity. Vector took stance, textbook Imperial Guard form. Coryl stepped back to give space. "Engage," Vector ordered coldly. The mechanic didn't lunge. He didn't even shift dramatically. He adjusted his right foot half a centimeter. That was it. Vector attacked. A fast, controlled strike meant to overwhelm and end quickly. The mechanic moved, not fast, but precise. He pivoted just enough that Vector's weight carried forward slightly past optimal center. The old man's hand tapped the instructor's forearm at a narrow angle. Not hard. Not aggressive. But perfectly placed. Vector's stabilizer fins flared instinctively to compensate. Too late. His forward lean amplified under the gravity field. The mechanic stepped inside the overcommitment zone and gently redirected Vector's shoulder with 2 fingers. The instructor stumbled. The arena's auto-defense system detected imbalance and triggered a correction field around him. Which made it worse. Vector's own assistive gear miscalculated center of gravity and locked his joints for half a second. Half a second was enough. The mechanic stepped behind him and tapped the back of his knee. Vector hit the floor. Hard. Gasps erupted from the cadets. The entire exchange had lasted less than 3 seconds. The mechanic stepped back immediately. No follow-up strike. No humiliation. Just correction. Vector pushed himself up, fury flashing in his eyes. "You exploited a system lag," he growled. The mechanic tilted his head. "No," he said. "I exploited habit." He turned slightly toward Coryl. "Your species compensates with rear stabilizers," he said conversationally. "But when you flare them that early, you broadcast your next move." Coryl instinctively adjusted his stance. The mechanic nodded faintly. "Better." The arena was silent now. No laughter. No mockery. Just recalculation. Vector straightened slowly. You claim prior knowledge of guard doctrine, he said. On what authority? The mechanic walked back to his tool case. He flipped the latches open. Inside were not just wrenches and diagnostic scanners, but an insignia plate bolted into the lid. Old, scratched, but unmistakable. Imperial Guard crest. Pre-reformed design. The kind no longer displayed publicly. The kind archived. Restricted. Several cadets recognized it instantly. Murmurs spread. That's not decorative, someone whispered. Vector stepped closer, eyes narrowing. That insignia is decommissioned. Yeah, the mechanic replied. So am I. He lifted the plate gently and turned it so the arena lights hit it clearly. Under the crest was a name engraved in small but precise lettering. The cadets nearest the floor read it first. Their expressions changed. Vector froze. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of the Academy's embedded AI systems chimed softly from the ceiling. Cross-referencing insignia and designation. A pause. Processing lights flickered across the chamber. Match found. Imperial Guard Chief Combat Instructor, retired. The words hung in the air like a gravitational shift. Elias' heart pounded. He stared at his grandfather. The old man closed the tool case gently. I just fix engines now, he said mildly. No one laughed. No one moved. Instructor Vector's posture changed subtly. Less towering. More measured. Behind them, the Imperial warship's maintenance lights flickered on in sequence. Elias realized something he hadn't understood before. His grandfather hadn't walked in to defend him. He had walked in because the stance was wrong. And he couldn't ignore it. The mechanic looked at Elias briefly. Front foot, he said calmly. You're lifting the heel when you brace. Elias swallowed and adjusted instinctively. The mechanic nodded once. That's better. Somewhere above them, an encrypted priority channel began pinging through the Academy's network. The AI hesitated before announcing it. Incoming transmission from Imperial Capital Authority. Every eye in the arena shifted toward the ceiling. Instructor Vector went very still. The old mechanic sighed softly. Well, he muttered, that didn't take long. The arena lights dimmed automatically. Not dramatically, just enough to signal priority override. Above the training floor, the Academy's central projection node descended from the ceiling, crystalline panels unfolding into a holographic display field. Incoming transmission authenticated, the AI announced. Imperial Capital Authority. Clearance level, Obsidian. The word landed heavier than gravity. Obsidian clearance wasn't for Academy disputes. It was for fleet mobilizations. War doctrine amendments. Imperial-level command. Every cadet stood straighter. Instructor Vector took one controlled breath and turned toward the projection node. The hologram stabilized. A tall figure in formal Imperial attire appeared mid-air, silver-threaded uniform, insignia of the Emperor's Guard displayed across the chest. Behind him, banners bearing the modern Guard crest hung in perfect symmetry. The official's eyes scanned the room. They stopped on the old mechanic. The projection sharpened instantly. Chief Instructor Marlowe, the official said. The entire arena felt like it tilted. Elias' throat went dry. His grandfather didn't salute. He didn't bow. He just gave a small nod. Admiral, he replied calmly. Instructor Vector stiffened. Admiral, someone whispered from the upper tier. The hologram stepped forward slightly within the projection field. You were not scheduled to visit the Academy, sir, the Admiral continued. Wasn't planning to, Marlowe replied. Just fixing a guidance array on Dock 7. The Admiral's gaze flicked toward Elias briefly, then back to Marlowe. Security logs indicate a doctrinal dispute. That's one way to put it, Marlowe said dryly. The Admiral turned his attention to Instructor Vector. Explain. Vector swallowed once. A cadet claimed that Imperial Guard stance protocol was flawed, citing familial authority. A faint pause. The Admiral's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. And you challenged the claim? Yes. And the result? Silence. Vector hesitated. He corrected my overcommitment, he admitted. A ripple moved through the cadets. The Admiral inclined his head slightly. Of course he did. The words carried no sarcasm. Just inevitability. Elias felt heat rush to his face. The Admiral looked back at Marlowe. Chief Instructor, I was under the impression you declined all ceremonial recognition following the Voron collapse. Marlowe shrugged lightly. I did. The name hit the arena like a shockwave. The Voron collapse. Every cadet knew it. 27 years ago, an entire Imperial Guard division had been ambushed and nearly annihilated by a coalition of Outer Rim insurgents. Tactical overcommitment had cost thousands of lives. The Empire had survived. But barely. Vector's voice lowered. You were present at Voron? Marlowe's gaze shifted to him. I was responsible for rewriting Guard combat doctrine after Voron, he said quietly. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was recalibration. The Admiral continued. Chief Instructor Marlowe trained the generation of guardsmen that stabilized the Empire after the collapse. Several cadets stared openly now. Elias' mind struggled to keep up. His grandfather had told stories. But never like this. Never about rewriting doctrine. Never about command authority. Marlowe glanced at the hologram with mild irritation. I trained them not to lean forward into a fight they didn't understand, he said. That's all. The Admiral allowed himself the faintest hint of a smile. Yes, sir. Instructor Vector felt smaller now, not physically, but structurally. Why was this not public record? He asked carefully. The Admiral's expression cooled. Because the Empire does not advertise weakness, he said. We advertise victory. Marlowe's eyes flicked briefly toward Elias. Victory starts with admitting what got you killed. The cadets shifted uneasily. The AI chimed softly again. Archive cross-reference complete. Confirmed. Current Imperial Guard stance protocol remains 82% derived from Chief Instructor Marlowe's post-Voron reforms. A low murmur spread. Coral stared at the floor. Vector's jaw tightened, but not in anger this time. In realization. Marlowe walked slowly toward the center of the ring again. Your stance isn't terrible, he told Vector evenly. It's just predictable. He turned slightly toward the cadets. You lean heavy on the front stabilizers because you're taught aggression equals dominance. He tapped his own boot lightly. Balance equals survival. Elias watched every movement. Every micro-adjustment. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't theatrical. It was efficient. The Admiral's hologram remained steady. Chief Instructor, he said, voice formal again, Imperial Capital would like to extend an official recognition ceremony. No, Marlowe cut in gently. A few cadets blinked. You've already got the doctrine, he continued. That's enough. The Admiral paused. Understood. His gaze shifted briefly to Elias again. Cadet, he said. Elias stiffened. Yes, sir. You would be wise to listen carefully. The transmission ended cleanly. The projection node retracted. Silence remained. No applause. No cheers. Just awareness. Instructor Vector took a slow step forward. He faced Elias. Then Marlowe. His voice was controlled. I acted prematurely. That was as close to an apology as Imperial training culture allowed. Marlowe nodded once. Happens. He picked up his tool case again. The arena lights returned to normal. Gravity recalibrated to baseline. As he walked toward the hangar doors, he paused beside Elias. You didn't tell them about the orbital drop drills, did you? He murmured quietly. Elias blinked. No? Good, Marlowe replied. Let's keep that one quiet. He continued toward Dock 7 without looking back. The cadets watched him go. Coral slowly adjusted his stance again. Front heel grounded. Weight centered. No one laughed. Elias remained standing in the center of the ring. For the first time since he arrived at the academy, no one was looking down at him. They were recalculating him. And somewhere in the academy's archived systems, a once-buried name had just resurfaced. Not as myth. As foundation. The academy did not return to normal. It tried. Gravity reset. Training schedules resumed. Cadets were dismissed for midday cycle. But no one actually left. They lingered in the upper tiers, whispering, cross-referencing, replaying the projection in their personal slates. Chief Instructor Marlowe. Elias' grandfather. The name that had just forced an obsidian clearance admiral to straighten his posture. Instructor Vector stood alone in the center of the ring long after the others should have dispersed. His pride hadn't shattered. It had shifted. There was a difference. Elias lingered too, unsure whether to follow his grandfather or disappear before the attention returned. He didn't have to choose. The hangar doors groaned open again. Marlowe stepped back inside, not hurried, not summoned. Just finished. He carried a small diagnostic unit now, wiping grease from his fingers with the same worn cloth. He paused when he saw the cadets still gathered. Training's not over, he asked mildly. No one laughed. Vector descended from the observation tier again. But this time, he didn't loom. He approached Marlowe with measured steps. Chief Instructor, Vector said carefully. Marlowe's eyebrow lifted slightly. Retired, he corrected. Retired Chief Instructor, Vector amended. He took one breath. Then, in full view of the cadets, he bowed his head. Not deeply, but clearly. Gasps echoed from the upper levels. Vector straightened again. I acted without confirming authority, he said. I disciplined your grandson under incorrect assumption. Marlowe studied him. You disciplined him because he mouthed off in your arena, Marlowe replied evenly. That part's fair. Elias blinked. Sir. Marlowe lifted a hand slightly without looking at him. Doesn't mean you were wrong, he added calmly. The cadets shifted uneasily. Vector glanced toward Elias. His assessment was correct. Marlowe nodded once. Then correct the stance. That's simple. No outrage. No demand for apology. Just correction. Vector turned to the cadets. Return to position. They obeyed instantly. Corel stepped back into the ring opposite Elias. His posture had changed subtly, front heel grounded, weight distributed more evenly. Marlowe gestured lightly. Again. Corel lunged. This time, the attack flowed differently. Less aggressive. More controlled. Elias braced instinctively, remembering his grandfather's small adjustments. He pivoted instead of blocking head-on. Corel's momentum carried forward, but not past center. The clash ended in balance instead of collapse. No one fell. Marlowe nodded faintly. Better. The word landed heavier than any metal. Above them, the Academy AI chimed again. Imperial Guard Central Doctrine Archive updated. Addendum, Stabilizer Weight Distribution, re-verified. Murmurs rippled through the arena. They were watching doctrine change in real time. Vector faced the cadets. Effective immediately, he announced, voice steady, guard form training will adjust to pre-overcommitment revision standards. He glanced briefly at Marlowe. Original balance parameters reinstated. The weight of that statement settled over the ring. This wasn't just a personal correction. It was institutional. Elias felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Not pride. Responsibility. One of the younger cadets hesitated before raising a hand. Chief Instructor, sir, she said cautiously to Marlowe, why was this removed in the first place? Marlowe exhaled slowly. Politics, he said simply. He crouched and tapped the arena floor lightly. After Voron, the Empire wanted strength. Aggression. Visual dominance. He straightened. They forgot that winning and surviving aren't always the same thing. Silence followed. Even Vector didn't interrupt. A soft ping echoed again through the chamber. Another transmission request. Lower priority this time. Ceremonial channel. Marlowe sighed faintly. Decline it, he said. The AI paused. Declined. The cadets exchanged confused glances. You're not staying? Corel asked carefully. Marlowe looked around the arena. At what? He replied. I fix engines. He turned to Elias. You coming, or you staying? Elias hesitated. The academy. The stairs. The recalculated respect. Then he glanced at the warship in Dock 7. I've still got drills, Elias said. Marlowe studied him for a second. Then nodded. Good. He adjusted Elias' shoulder slightly. Just 2 fingers, same as always. Don't lean where they expect you. He turned and walked back toward the hangar. Halfway there, he paused and glanced over his shoulder. And for the record, he added casually, you didn't mention the orbital drop drills. Several cadets blinked. Orbital, what? Someone whispered. Elias felt a grin tug at the corner of his mouth. No, sir, he replied. Good, Marlowe said. Let's keep that one quiet. The hangar doors closed behind him. This time, no dramatic entrance. No applause. Just the steady hum of maintenance crews returning to work. Instructor Vector looked at Elias. Cadet. Yes, sir. You will assist in demonstrating corrected stance protocols for the next cycle. A beat. Yes, sir. Vector nodded once. The cadets shifted subtly, not mocking. Measuring. Respect didn't explode into cheers. It recalibrated. And in Dock 7, an old mechanic returned to his warship, content that the balance he'd once fought to preserve still had someone watching it. Not because of legacy. but because of understanding. The Academy didn't issue an announcement. It didn't need to. By the next training cycle, everyone knew. The stance had changed. Cadets lined the ring in silence as Instructor Vector stood at the center, posture adjusted, subtly, but unmistakably. His front heel was grounded. His weight distributed evenly. His stabilizers relaxed instead of flared. Guard form revision, Vector stated calmly. Effective immediately. No one questioned it. Not after yesterday. Elias stood opposite Coril again. This time, there was no laughter in the air. No commentary. Just attention. Engage, Vector ordered. Coril lunged, but not recklessly. Elias pivoted, not defensively, but balanced. Their clash rang through the arena in controlled bursts of force. Weight met weight without collapse. Momentum redirected instead of exploited. The exchange ended with both of them upright. Stable. Vector nodded once. Better. The word carried through the chamber like doctrine. From the upper tier, cadets whispered, not mocking, but analyzing. His lighter on his feet. His not committing as hard. That stance is harder to read. Elias stepped back, heart steady. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he wasn't trying to prove he belonged. He just belonged. After drills, cadets didn't scatter immediately. They approached him. Not aggressively. Curious. Coril was the first. You weren't exaggerating, he said, voice low. Elias shrugged. I didn't think I was. Coril studied him for a moment. Why didn't you say more? About everything. Elias glanced toward Dock 7 through the hangar viewport. His grandfather's warship sat quiet and scarred, maintenance crews moving along its hull like careful surgeons. He doesn't like being announced, Elias said simply. Coril nodded slowly. I understand. That was new. Understanding. Above them, the Academy AI chimed. Imperial Guard Central has acknowledged doctrinal update. Formal commendation request submitted to retired Chief Instructor Marlowe. Elias winced slightly. Across the arena, Vector looked toward Dock 7. The hangar doors slid open just enough to reveal Marlowe stepping inside, wiping his hands again. He looked up at the AI panel. Decline, he said. Decline confirmed. The AI responded immediately. The cadets stared. Marlowe walked into the arena once more, but this time there was no tension. Just presence. Vector approached him and stood straight. Chief Instructor, he said, without hesitation this time. Marlowe sighed lightly. Retired. Retired Chief Instructor, Vector corrected. The Academy is in your debt. Marlowe shook his head. No, he said. You just adjusted. He looked at the cadets gathered around. Technique matters more than pride. Silence. Not uncomfortable. Absorbing. He gestured lightly toward Elias. You listen, he told his grandson. Elias nodded. I try. Good. Marlowe turned to leave again, but paused at the edge of the ring. One more thing, he added without turning back. If you ever think aggression makes you stronger. He tapped the metal floor with his boot. Remember Voron. The name carried weight. Even the cadets who hadn't lived through its aftermath felt it. Strength isn't leaning forward, Marlowe continued. It's knowing when not to. He stepped back into the hangar. This time, no dramatic doors. No holograms. Just the steady hum of tools against hull plating. The Academy resumed full training cycles that week. Cadets adapted. Stances improved. Balance replaced bravado. Elias found himself assisting newer students, adjusting feet, correcting overcommitment. Not because he was the strongest. He wasn't. Not the fastest. Not the most decorated. But he understood something they didn't. He'd grown up watching the man who rebuilt an empire's guard without ever asking for recognition. Respect didn't arrive in cheers. It arrived in silence. In small nods. In recalibrated distance. On the final drill of the week, Vector called Elias forward in front of the class. Demonstrate corrected front stabilizer engagement, he ordered. Elias did. Clean. Balanced. No overreach. When he finished, the arena was quiet. Not because they were unimpressed. Because they were learning. From the observation tier, the Academy AI logged the session. Imperial Guard Doctrine Archive, updated. Elias stepped back into line. Through the viewport, he saw his grandfather climbing a maintenance ladder along the warship's hull, grease-stained and unconcerned with ceremony. Empires remembered victories. Mechanics remembered how to win them.
and sometimes,
all it took to change an academy was someone who refused to lean where they were expected to fall.